So today's the day. I've decided I'm going to start taking the old 39A apart. Don't really know what I'm going to do with it. It's going to be kind of take it apart, see what it needs. I know it needs a head gasket because I'm getting a little bit of antifreeze coolant into the engine, just a little. So I thought this would be kind of my next step-by-step go-through restoration. Unlike the G, I do anticipate doing a complete restoration on this, like paint and everything. I may not do the painting because I'd kind of like it to be professionally done. So what we're going to start with is taking off all of the sheet metal here. To get to the engine, I don't really have to do that, but since I'm doing, a complete teardown on this, that's just what I'm going to go ahead and do. I know I need to rebuild the fan shaft on it because it's not the friction style and it's kind of jerry-rigged together. So engine, fan shaft, not sure about the radiator. It seems like I've got a leak somewhere. I'm not sure if it's in the gasket or the actual radiator. The way it just seeps, I would assume it's a gasket. So we'll get that rebuilt. Then I might focus on just getting engine forward done, and then I'll look into the transmission. But we'll see as it's worked out on all of my other tractors. I've just kind of torn it all apart at the same time because the biggest thing is with the first reduction gear cover, you got to have that off and the pulley off and all of that to work on, say, your main bearings or anything like that. Well, if you're going to have that cover off, that's the time to work on the transmission because you got to have that cover off for that also. So I started removing some bolts already, and I've already come to my first surprise. So I'll talk about that here in a minute. But in short, to get the hood and everything off, so the hood and the gas tank all removes as one, we got to take the steering shaft out because that goes through the hood. So to get the steering shaft out, we're going to remove the nut back here on the steering wheel. I'm going to pop that steering wheel off. Sometimes that gets a little hard because there's a little woodruff key in there. And we got to take off the nose cone up here, and that's where our first surprise is. So anyway, we take off this nose piece. You got 3 bolts, 1, 2, 3. Typically this is cracked here. I'll have to see when I pull this off if it was bondoed. Now for the little bit of fun surprise, seat belt. So what's going on here is typically they had some fabric over this to kind of protect the paint, I think, and things. Over here, well, somebody, rather than using true, like, what I would call restoration quality fabric, they just use seatbelt, which, hey, it's actually not a bad idea. So yeah, from there we'll take these 2 bolts off here and we will unscrew the engagement of the steering worm gear in here. So while I still have the steering wheel on, we'll turn this and pop it out. Okay, so I got the cap off here. Something to note, I'm not sure what I'll do about it, is to note the thickness of the gaskets on here. The steering was nice and tight on it, so the number of gaskets here is one of the adjustments that can be made for the play in the steering. So it's important to get that right, mainly, of course, when you get it back together. So with that off, you can see I got it out here, but and amazing to me, but it's obvious somebody has had this apart before, so shouldn't be a surprise, is there we go, get the focus right. The steering wheel popped off, and that woodruff key just came right out with my fingers. So this shaft is ready to slide out. Okay, so we got the steering shaft out. Skip along here. I took the grills off. Straightforward. 1, 2, 3, and then you've got your bolts here on the inside of the grill. Whoever put this tractor together last, they loved never sees. Not saying that's a bad thing. So moving back here, we got the dash off, and to get the hood and gas tank off, there's one bolt, at least on this tractor, one bolt there holding the hood assembly on. Up front here, it just sits on there. I realized I was about ready to pull it off that the temperature gauge line they put between the hood and gas tank support. They fed it over that, so I can't pull this off until I do something with that wire, that cable. So I was gonna have to drain this anyway to get the head off and the lower water pipe and things like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and drain it now, so I can unthread that here, get that out of there. I unthreaded the fuel line so that can come off with the gas tank. Just got to be careful not to break it. And the hood and whole assembly is ready to lift off. Okay, so we got the tank off here. As I suspected, this had been repaired before, because you could see in it that there was a little bend up if you look back in the videos. So looks okay from the outside. Whenever I work on this hood, I may try and bend this down a little bit, get it to match better. We'll have to see what condition the tank is in on the top, and honestly, my plan, at least if I was to make this tractor 100% original, would be to change the gas tank, because this is not a 39 gas tank. And how I know that is it does not have the starter tank. They just welded, looks like they maybe riveted a piece in there, and they stuck a filler neck on it to look like there was a gas tank back there, but there's not. The actual 39A's tank, the small tank was attached to the big tank. It was part of it. Sadly, I have a tank like that for a 39 or 40B. I don't have one for an A. So yeah, I got the glass bowl off. Getting these are very sensitive. They tend to break in here. Since I'm not using this tank as much, I may just decide to leave that in the tank, and they can go with it, and find a new one of those. Yeah, otherwise, it's good to see that this wasn't just painted on the outside and it's all rusty and junk on the inside. It actually doesn't look half bad. Two more tidbits here. So these old John Deeres did not use a water pump. They just used a thermosiphon system. So as the block heated up the water, it naturally flowed up the upper radiator pipe into the top of the radiator, and then as it cooled, it fell down, recirculated down, and so on. To compensate for that, they have a really large volume. This thing was, I think, at least a gallon low, so getting close to, I don't know what's there, maybe 8 gallons or so. I know my G uses 12 gallons. I know this would be a little bit less. But yeah, another fun fact, and this is a disappointing one. You know, I wanted to get this tractor as original as possible without too much work. I had posted a picture of this tractor months ago on the 2-cylinder Facebook page, and someone looked at it in detail enough that they zoomed in and noticed that these are 10 spline axles. Now, the interesting thing about that is they switched over from 10 spline to 12 spline late in 1937. Well, this is a 1939. It technically shouldn't have 10 spline axles on it. Now, whether somebody just changed out the whole rear end, you know, because you can just unbolt this back here and the whole axle housing comes off, and they just took a rear end from another tractor, or somebody actually switched the axles out, or, you know, crazier things have happened. You know, I doubt that they're original and from some leftover parts after more than a year later. But we'll see. I sent for the info on this tractor. I paid the 2-cylinder club to go off and get the info on this. What I mean by that is if you go to the 2-cylinder website, you can request the info. I think it's like $45. Then I think $12 shipping. And it tells you the date it was built, the date it was shipped, where it was shipped to, and then if there's any notes on it, like any special equipment, any wheels, tire information, and so on. So, yeah, curious to see if it comes back with anything, but I'm not super optimistic. I have a feeling this was just swapped out at some point. It was one of the reasons why I like this tractor was, even though it's cutoffs, and as much as I would love to have steel on it and think it would look so cool, I just would not want to use this thing with steel on it. But I was going to keep it like this. I'm hoping it doesn't come back and just say, oh, you know, it had cast centers or something at some point, because that's just kind of boring. But yeah, so moving on here. I haven't quite thought of what I'm going to do next. I guess just start taking all of this apart that you see in front of you. I'll take the oil bath off, take off the carb, air inlet here. I guess I don't have to take the upper water pipe off now. Take off the lower water pipe, valve cover, tappet assembly, and get this head off. All right, we are rolling right along here. So your oil bath comes off with your 4 bolts here. You had your rubber hose that goes to your air inlet, just 2 bolts on the front of your carburetor, and 2 bolts back here. Get the carburetor off. Don't forget to take your throttle shaft off. It's got a little cotter pin down here. Exhaust was 4 bolts, and sadly, that one flange there is broke. Yeah, you've got your oil line here. So this feeds oil to the valve tappets here. This is kind of like my G, in that the oil comes in the top and then goes into that trough there and bleeds down onto the valves, or push rods and things. So everything looking good so far. Got the lower water pipe off. That went fairly straightforward. A lot of times those lower water pipes are in pretty bad shape. The pipe looks good. This here, turn on my light, has a little bit of chunk out of it, but I think it's perfectly fine. This is kind of unique to the earlier ones. It was, I think this is threaded into the head. Their later ones just had a flange where it bolted on each side. So we'll take off our tappet assembly here. That's interesting. We've got 2 nuts here. I wonder if that's original. On my others, I haven't had 2 nuts. I've just had 1 nut. There's 2 nuts there, like a lock nut. I'll have to look in the parts book to see if that's original. You can see this head stud was threaded in a little too much. May need to make note of that and draw that one out a little bit. So yeah, take this off. These technically 4 nuts. Tappet assembly comes right off, and push rods come out. So I'm looking at the parts manual, and it's really interesting to see the differences. And I'll have to go back later. I don't have a parts manual on me for a unstyled tractor, but to see and know the differences between like this 39 and even, you know, starting with the 40, like late 40, 41, how they changed everything. So even like the tappet, you know, here is kind of your ball. And at the end of the push rod is the socket that it goes into. This is drastically different from, say, my G or my B that I've done, where they actually have the cup on the end of here, and the push rod is just rounded. It's spherical on the end, and that's all. You don't have this socket or anything like that. I mean, looking at the parts manual, you know, these spacers here are unique. This stud holding the tappet assembly on is kind of unique. The other tractors of mine, this is just one long stud, but this is like a hex here that you actually get to use to thread that in there. I'm sure it costs more to make, otherwise it was kind of nice. I've had to use a pipe wrench before to install or remove these. So just interesting differences in the different tractors, and of course, you know, it's my engineering mind. Wonder why they deviated from that. I can see, you know, this would have been easier to make had this been just, you know, a standard rod. But yeah. Okay, we got each of the head nuts off. Let's give it a whack with a rubber mallet. See if we can get this thing off. Get that out of my way. Ah! There we go. Now to get the thing out of here. Okay, so that came off relatively easily. I just kind of had to lift it up and rotate it to stick the intake manifold out this way, and kind of as it was facing flat with the the springs down and the valve seats sticking up, I lifted it up and then just walked it out this way. So let's see if we can get a closer look here. You can kind of see down in number 2 cylinder there is some antifreeze, and that's where my leak was. Trying to look at my actual head gasket here, and I'm not sure. It's kind of wet on this side versus, you know, the other side is all dry. So I'm wondering if my leak was through here also. Well, you kind of got that on both sides. It's pretty dark in here on the firing ring. So yeah, not sure. Hopefully just a head gasket. I know somebody I'll send it to probably have the head tested. I'll give you a look at the head here. So everything seems to look fine. See if the extra light there helps. Like I said, you know, you see a dry cylinder over here. This one's a little wet. Yeah, just praying it's just a head gasket. These older John Deere's had flat heads. So that's like what this one is. Not sure what I'm going to do with the intake manifold. It's obviously perfectly good, other than that one bolt hole broke off. It'd be nice. I always just like having a fresh gasket in there or something. These studs, I mean, if you're going to take this apart, you want to do it with the head off, because as soon as you try taking this nut off, it's going to break. Those studs get stuck in there. They break. A lot of times you have to drill them out. One interesting thing to note is these sleeves here. Let's see if you can see it right there. And there's another one here for the push rods. That's sometimes, I believe, like what you find on the Bs. They rot out, and then what happens is you get coolant, you know, into your oil because it'll follow your valve guide, your push rod, and into your oil. So yeah. Looking into the actual bore, it's got a bit of a lip on it. I was gonna mic it and see what we get. Overall, doesn't look too bad in there. Curious to see if this is original size. Probably not. You know, considering this tractor has been taken apart at least once before. So yeah, let's see what she measures. Okay, last clip of the day, since I probably have recorded more than enough to keep anyone's interest. Looking down in here, everything is clean. If you can see, the screen down there is really clean. No sludge anywhere. Everything looks really good. It's always good to see. So I knew when I got this, it oddly had a oil dipstick in it. And here is how they did it. Some farmer fix here. Well, he just got a rod that was threaded on both ends, drilled a hole, stuck it through here, threaded the nut on, and then they actually even had to grind this flat here, I guess, for it to fit in there. So interesting farmer fix. And yeah, another interesting find. Curious if I have one of these that is correct for this tractor without a hole for the dipstick in it. Yeah, so you all have a good day. Not sure what the next video is going to be on. We'll just continue tearing this apart. Like I said, I think she's going to need a new radiator core. If you look in here, everything's kind of wet, and I think it's more than just the gaskets. And then, you know, this is the old rubber mount that's been jerry-rigged somehow. We want to switch that out to the friction disc type, so we're going to take this apart. I will want to take a look inside the governor, make sure everything is copacetic there, and yeah, and then we'll move on to the transmission later and things like that. So hey, give me a thumbs up if you like this, please. I think supposedly it helps me out. Subscribe if you can. I think that helps me too. So yeah, you all have a good day.